What's up? Welcome to the courtroom.
I am Theo.
And I'm Oj. And in this podcast, we tell you stories about people's life, liberty, and property.
Kikwentuhan namin kayo about court rulings in a way that will make you understand jurisprudence like a 9-year-old.
All persons before the honor Supreme Court of Justice shall give their attention for the court now in session.
So join us as we delve into true crime, political controversies, and all things started the chismis every week.
In 1995, AAA had a romantic relationship with Celso Melgar. This love resulted in the birth of BBB, an illegitimate child. Inako naman ni Celso yung anak nila ni AAA as can be seen in the child's certificate of live birth at sa mga pictures nila with BBB.
However, AAA's relationship with Celso turned sour as the latter had an affair with the younger woman. Bigla na lang siyang tumigil magbigay ng suporta nung nag-1-year-old si BBB. Kaya naman, AAA filed a case for support which was eventually granted.
Despite the said grant, hindi pa din nagbigay ng support si Celso. So, AAA filed a criminal case against him, charging him with violation of Section 5 of RA 9262, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Children's Act, or yung tinatawag na VAUSI.
Wait lang, Teo. Bakit nga ba kakaiba yung mga names sa present case, AAA and BBB?
Dahil sa sensitivity ng case, the court opted to keep the identity of the mother and the child confidential.
Okay, so tuloy tayo sa story. Nakalagay sa information na final before the Regional Trial Court na on or about the month of August 2001 at nung mga sumunod pang buwan, Celso, with deliberate intent, committed acts of economic abuse against AAA and her minor son, BBB, na at the time 12 years old na, by depriving them of financial support. And this is in spite of Celso having the means and capacity to give financial support. So because of this, it caused daw mental or emotional anguish, public ridicule, or humiliation to both of them.
Celso pleaded not guilty to the charge against him, although after arraignment, nagkaroon sila ng compromise agreement ni AAA sa civil aspect ng case, meaning with regards to the financial support. Na-approve naman ng RTC yung compromise agreement, and with Celso's conformity, the criminal aspect of the case was provisionally dismissed.
Kaso, 1 year later, or on June 24, 2011, na-revive yung criminal action against Celso. Kasi binenta niya yung property na supposed to be para sa support in arrears ni BBB from 2001 to 2010, pursuant dun sa compromise agreement nila ni AAA.
As per AAA, afford naman daw ni Celso na mag-provide ng support of 5,000 pesos per month because he has a lavish lifestyle with his family and he owns a Toyota Avanza and his children are enrolled in a prominent school.
Habang yung anak nila na si BBB is a scholar, gumagastos daw siya ng 20,000 pesos a month para sa needs ng anak nila. At dito, 8,000 pesos yung support na hinihingi niya kay Celso.
Since palaging absent si Celso sa trial, he was deemed to have waived his right to adduce evidence. In short, di siya makakapag-submit ng evidence niya.
So, since di siya nag-submit ng evidence, ibig sabihin, magro-rule yung court based lang dun sa mga pleadings and pieces of evidence na submitted sa kanila. Kamusta naman yung ruling ng RTC and CA sa case na to?
The RTC found Melgar guilty beyond reasonable doubt of violating Section 5E of RA 9262. Tapos yung CA inaffirm yung decision ng RTC.
So, just to be clear, ang issue is kung na-violate nga ba talaga ni Celso yung Section 5E ng VAUSI Act, right?
Right.
Okay, so, spill ko na ba yung ruling ng Supreme Court?
Sige, spill it.
So, as per the court, Celso's petition is bereft of merit. Meaning,
Denied.
yes. Bakit nga ba?
Tingnan natin yung rationale ng court. Pero ano ba muna tong VAUSI na to, Oj?
Yung VAUSI or Republic Act 9262 kasi was enacted in 2004. It is a landmark legislation that defines and criminalizes acts of violence against women and their children perpetrated by women's intimate partners, that is, your husband, former husband, or any person who has or had a sexual or dating relationship, or with whom the woman has a common child, or against her child, whether legitimate or illegitimate, within or without the family abode, which result in or is likely to result in, among other things, economic abuse.
Sa Section 3 ng VAUSI, makikita natin yung definition ng economic abuse. Sabi dito, economic abuse refers to the act that make or attempt to make a woman financially dependent, which includes but is not limited to the following. 1. Withdrawal of financial support or preventing the victim from engaging in any legitimate profession, occupation, business, or activity, except in cases wherein the spouse or the partner objects on valid, serious, and moral grounds as defined in Article 73 of the Family Code.
2. Deprivation or threat of deprivation of financial resources and the right to the use and enjoyment of the conjugal, community, or property owned in common.
Number 3, destroying household properties. And 4, controlling the victim's own money or properties or solely controlling the conjugal money or properties.
Okay, so highlight natin yung applicable lang dito sa case. Yung deprivation of support of a common child of the man, which is accused, and the woman, who is the victim, regardless if legitimate or illegitimate yung anak nila. Diba this specific act is penalized by Section 5E of VAUSI?
Yes, particularly sa Section 5E, Paragraph 2 na nakalagay is attempting to compel or compelling the woman or her child to engage in conduct which the woman or her child has the right to desist from or to desist from conduct which the woman and her child has the right to engage in.
And nakalagay din sa paragraph 2, section 5E, yung depriving or threatening to deprive the woman or her children of financial support legally due her or her family, or deliberately providing the woman's children insufficient financial support. So, sa case na to, the court found that all the elements of violation of Section 5E of VAUSI are present.
Bakit, Och? Ano ba yung na-establish nila dito?
Isa-isayin natin. Una, si Celso and AAA had a romantic relationship, resulting in DBB's birth. Then, Celso freely acknowledged his paternity over BBB. Tapos, Celso had failed to provide BBB support ever since the latter was just 1 year old. And lastly, his intent of not supporting BBB was made more apparent when he sold to a third party his property, which was supposed to answer for, among others, his support in arrears to BBB. So, following this, the court finds no reason to deviate from the factual findings of the trial court as affirmed by the CA. Kasi wala naman daw indication that it overlooked, misunderstood, or misapplied the surrounding facts and circumstances of the case. In fact, nasa best position pa nga yung trial court to assess and determine the credibility of the witnesses presented by both parties.
Although, inattempt pa din ni Celso na ma-absolve siya from criminal liability, sabi niya kasi he was charged daw with violation of Section 5I of RA 9262, not Section 5E. Yun daw yung nakalagay sa information that he allegedly caused mental or emotional anguish, public ridicule, or humiliation to AAA and her son, BBB. So, hindi daw siya pwede i-convict sa violation of Section 5E of 9262 kasi di naman yun yung kinomplain or di yun yung nakalagay sa information.
Pumasa ba naman sa SC yung argument niya?
Syempre hindi. As per SC, Celso's contention is untenable.
Yes, kasi yung Section 5I of RA 9262 is a form of psychological violence. It punishes the act of causing mental or emotional anguish, public ridicule, or humiliation to the woman or her child, including but not limited to repeated verbal and emotional abuse and denial of financial support or custody of minor children or denial of access to the woman's child or children.
So yung psychological violence is an element of violation of Section 5I. Para ma-establish yung psychological violence as an element of the crime, it is necessary to show proof of commission of any of the acts enumerated sa provision na to. In the case of support, it must be first shown that the accused denial thereof, which is by itself already a form of economic abuse, further caused mental or emotional anguish to the woman victim or to their common child.
Kaso, hindi na-establish ng prosecution na nagkaroon ng psychological abuse and wala din evidence that showed that the deprivation caused either AAA or BBB any mental or emotional anguish. Therefore, Celso cannot be convicted of violation of Section 5I of RA 9262.
Iba naman pala yung nakalagay na crime sa information. Bakit mako-convict pa siya under a different crime, which is Section 5E of RA 9262?
Kasi may tinatawag na variance doctrine. This allows the conviction of an accused for a crime proved, which is different from but necessarily included in the crime charge. So, the courts, correctly convicted Celso of violation of Section 5E of RA 9262 as a deprivation or denial of support by itself and even without the additional element of psychological violence is already specifically penalized therein.
So in the end, the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the Court of Appeals, finding petitioner Celso Melgar guilty beyond reasonable doubt of violating Section 5E of the VAUSI Act. And aside from imprisonment, he was ordered to pay a fine of 300,000 pesos and undergo a mandatory psychological counseling or psychiatric treatment.
If you guys like this audiogram, please listen to the full episode on Spotify or on your favorite podcast app, where you can hear our insights on this case. Again, this is Oj.
And Theo, leaving you with a reminder to always look back in history because precedent shall rule the future.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again in the courtroom.
Bye!